This week's Parsha.
No, he said it's on.
This week's Parsha, we have one of the great tragedies in the Torah. Parsha Tzav concluded with Aaron and his sons remaining in the Ohel Moed for a week, for 7 days, and Moshe was performing the inaugural service, showing them what they need to be doing when the Mishkan is opened officially. So this week's parsha begins, Vayi b'yom Shemini. It's the 8th day. It's Rosh Chodesh Nisan. That was the day that's known as the Hakamat HaMishkan, the day when the Mishkan was erected. But really, the 7 days before, it was like the practice run, the trial run, the 7 days before. This is the 8th day. So what happens? Aaron has 4 sons. Elazar is Samar, and he has Nadav and Avihus. And Nadav and Avihus, according to just a simple reading of the pasuk, took Eish Zara. Eish Zara means like a strange fire. They took the censers, the fire pans, and they brought an incense offering into the Mishkan, into the Kodesh Kodashim, depending on the different interpretations, which was one that had not been instructed that they should do. And fire came out from heaven, burnt them completely. Rashi brings down that their bodies and their clothes were intact, meaning fire entered their nostrils, burnt their souls, and their bodies and their clothing actually were intact. They died in the Mishkan. And
What is
intact.
intact?
Didn't get damaged. It means the body was left in whole. Now we're talking about Nadav and Avihus. The fact that Torah even bothers mentioning them, because they weren't just 2 shlamazels. They were. Rashi brings down before the Medrash that Moshe and Aaron weren't even as great as Nadav and Avihus. The Kadoshai Kadesh, the Krovai Kadesh, those that are closest to me, I'll be sanctified. Hashem becomes a Kiddush Hashem. Somehow their death, created the boundaries that were necessary for the functioning of the Mishkan. Right? How careful we have to be going into the Mishkan. It was through their death God was sanctified. That's what the Medrash says. But I understand just a couple of things. Number one, the Gemara Megillah asks that Vayehi bayom Shemini. So it points out that Vayehi, it says Vayehi erev vayivoker. So it says that the building of the Mishkan was like the creation of the world. It was as joyous an occasion, this day, this Rosh Chodesh Nisan, as the creation of the world. According to Rashi, the way we explained the last few weeks, it comes out very good because the Chet HaEgel, the sin of the Egel, the golden calf, needed a tikkun. The building of the Mishkan was the tikkun for the Chet HaEgel. So this cleansed and atoned for the sin of the golden calf. This was this building. So the Gemara asks a question. It says, usually when you hear where the word Vayahi, it's in the Gemara Megillah, Vayahi b'mei Achashverosh, the word Vayahi is a contraction of Voihi, woe. It's like pending calamity. So it says usually you find the word Vayahi in the Torah. That's not a good thing. That means there's calamity. There's an Achashverosh and a Haman coming. There's bad things about to happen. Why is the happiest day, this unbelievable, like the building, creation of heaven and earth, this Mishkan, the 10 crowns were taken, and the Asara Atarim were taken, this Rosh Chodesh was a incredibly joyous occasion. So why is it defined by the words Vayahi? Gemara says because of the death of the sons of Aaron, because of the death of Nadav and Avihus, that was the pending calamity. So the question that has to be asked, I understand something tragic happened on that day, but that doesn't define the entire day as being a tragedy. You know? We have the capacity to compartmentalize. Gemara tells us that if somebody on the day that a death of his father inherits a tremendous amount of money because the father died, he's supposed to make 2 brachas. Baruch dayin ha'emes and atova ha'metiv. Means the dayin ha'emes is where we justify God's punishment and God's din against us. Tova ha'metiv because of a windfall, just inherited a lot of money. Meaning we compartmentalize this good, and there's tragedy, and there's happiness. Rahman al-Tzlan, no one should have to go through a situation where a chassan and kala, somebody, they have to sit shiva. Right? A parent dies. They have to have the chasana, and there has to be sheva brachas, and there's certain rules of mourning, but you compartmentalize the experiences. We don't define everything as being bad. The fact that we're saying Vayehi b'yom Shemini, somehow it's defining even the joy, that closeness that we now reestablished, somehow has something to do with the tragedy itself, and that needs to be explained. Otherwise, it should not be defining the entire day as a tragedy because of what happened to. We should be able to say good things happen, bad things happen. Not all Vayehi b'yom Shemini. That's all tragedies. Trying to figure out, the way to answer this is to figure out somehow the cause of celebration and the joy is also what caused the result of their death. And the question is, what is that connection? Rashi in Mishpatim says something very interesting. At Har Sinai, says that the Zakenim, the elders, celebrated. It says, Vayochlu, Vayishtu, Vayechazu, that they ate and they drank and they gazed upon Hashem, whatever the Shekhinah settling on the mountain. And Rashi says that this actually was a condemnation. That they were acting in a frivolous manner. They were acting in a way that was not appropriate. And really, they should have been punished at Har Sinai for, after indulging in food and drink, right? Moshe Rabbeinu, 40 days, he goes up to be with Shemaim. It says, Lechem lo achalti yain lo shasisi, means you're up there with God, you don't indulge. They're sitting there eating and drinking, and they're gazing. Somehow gazing, looking at the Shekhinah, was not an appropriate thing to do. And Rashi says an unbelievable thing. Rashi says that the Zakenim, the elders, should have been punished at Har Sinai. They should have been killed right away. But God did not want to stir the simcha. God did not want to disturb the Sinaitic revelation, the happiness of that was like a chasna. He didn't want to. So what happened? He waited until the Hakamas HaMishkan, and when the Mishkan was erected, that's when the two leading Zakenim, Nadav and Avihu, that's when they were punished. Very difficult to understand what's going on over here. First of all, if you don't want to share the simcha there, then why are you sharing the simcha here? Right? Pick a different day. Wait till when they got the hangover the next day. Why does it wait to here? Well, here seems to be the same thing. You don't want to share the simcha, and yet it does. It's share Shemini. The whole day now becomes tragedy because of it. So why does it wait till here and then it happens here? I'm trying to figure that out. So we're asking two questions here, two primary questions in the story of Nadav and Avihu. Number one, the Gemara in Megillah's question is that why is the Yom HaShmini, which is the day that is akin to the creation of heaven and earth, such a happy occasion, why is it defined by the words Vayehi Bayom, which implies pending doom and tragedy? It's defining it as a like why we say, the pasuk in Megillah, that's what it's by Vayehi B'Me'ach Hashveirosh. We know that that's a tragic, there's tragedy going to be happening. So here too. So the more answers because of the death of Nadav Avihu. So our question is, but then why are defining the entire day as a calamity, as a tragedy? There's a lot of positive things that compartmentalize, like we say, other things you compartmentalize. Number two, the very reason why the Zakenim are not being punished at Har Sinai, because you don't want to stir the simcha, you don't want to disturb the happy occasion, then why aren't they doing that? Why isn't that same sensitivity being shown here? Why are they being killed here? I'm going to share with you an idea I heard from my Rosh Hashiva, and I think it has tremendous impact on every single relationship that we have. For sure with our spouse, but even teacher student, rabbi community. This is an idea that really, I think, every level of relationship it impacts, and I think very often we stumble in this particular area. In Parshas Beshalach, when Bnei Yisrael emerged from the Yam Suf, there was an extremely bonding experience. The Egyptians were punished. In fact, their bodies were cast onto the shore so that the Jews should see their captors, those who had mistreated them all these years, lying dead. Right? Their bodies didn't just sink to the bottom. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu made the Malach Hayam, the angel of the sea, have to spit back the bodies. The Gemara brings the whole medrash that the Malach Hayam was upset. You're not giving me the bodies. I'm having to spit them out. And therefore, later on, by I think it was with Sisera. Then you'll get the bodies back because they will drown. There's a whole story there, but they had it. Why? Because the Jews, God wanted to show how much He loves the Jews, and that their bodies of their captors are being spit back onto the Yam. It was a very close binding, and it says Masha. It says that that even Yecheskel ben Buzi, the greatest of our Nevi'im, says that what he saw, the visions he saw. That the shivcha alayam, that the maidservant, the lowly maidservant, that had higher visions of prophecy, even more than Yecheskel ben Buzi, was very, very close. And the Jews break out in song, as Yashir Moshe leads the Jewish people. And one of the things that they say, the Torah hasn't even been given yet. They say, Zeh Keli Vanavehu. This is my God, va'anavehu. What does it mean, anavehu? Different pshatim. One of the pshatim, anavehu, is, right, that I will adorn him, I will beautify him. From here the Gemara learns that we have an obligation of hidur mitzvah. That when you're doing a mitzvah, you should try to do it in the most beautiful way. The most beautiful Sefer Torah, the most beautiful Megillah, the most beautiful pair of tefillin, the most beautiful talis, the most beautiful lulav and esrog. Zeh keli v'anaveyu. You glorify Hashem. Don't just do it in a way that you're yotzei. Do it in a way that, so it'll cost a little money, but you do it in a beautiful way. That's the obligation we learn from this. Which itself needs a very interesting. That's a concept. We haven't even got the mitzvahs yet. The mitzvahs are coming at Har Sinai. That's weeks later. We're already talking about glorifying Hashem with the way we do the mitzvahs, even before we actually have been instructed to do the mitzvahs. Why Al Hayam was it important to stress the concept of Hidur Mitzvah? Right? This beautifying Hashem through mitzvahs. Why was that an important fact? There seems to be also a very interesting machlokus between the Ramchal. Ramchal was a Moshe Chaim Luzzatto. He wrote a number of different seminal works, meaning fundamentals of Jewish philosophy. Brilliant man. Lived in the 18th century. He's a bit of a rebel. He was cast out of many different communities. But Moshe Chaim Luzzatto wrote a sefer that he studied, and basic Musar sefer in all the yeshivas they studied. It's called the Mesilas Yesharim. The path of the upright, the just, and phenomenal sefer. I mean, it's saying that the great people knew it by heart because of this, the impact, that of this sefer. So the Ramchal lists, categorizes, there's mitzvahs that we do out of love, from ahava, serving God with love, and then there's yira. Yira means fear or respect or awe, right? And it's interesting that in the category of mitzvos that he says the service of God that's done out of yira, he brings down the pasuk Zeh keli v'anavehu, that we have to beautify the mitzvahs, we have to adorn Hashem in the way we do his mitzvahs. So he sees the idea of beautifying mitzvahs as a function of yiras Hashem, which itself needs a little bit of understanding. Why is that a function of fearing God to do things in a beautiful manner, right? The Kada Kemach, that's Rabbeinu Bachya, lived in the 13th century. One of the early Rishonim, Rabbeinu Bachya, Rabbeinu Chaya, commentary on Chumash, and he also has the philosophical work called the Kada Kemach. He brings down that the way we show our love for Hashem is by beautifying the mitzvahs. So he seems to see that beautifying something, adorning something, is really an expression of love, whereas the Ramchal brings it down as an expression of yiras Hashem, respect or fear. I'm trying to understand what is there. Is that an argument? What are they arguing about? Is beautifying something, making something beautiful, is that love or is that fear? That's the. So we're asking a couple of questions here. In the story of Nadav and Avihus, what happened? Just understand it. How did they do what they did? The Ramban is so bothered. He says, how could they just go into the Kodesh Kodashim without being instructed to do so? You can't. He comes up, there's a whole list of other sins that they did. Some of them was Shisuya Yayin, they went and drunk, according to some. Very hard to understand, but the day is defined as a tragedy. Vayahi. Why is the whole day a tragedy? That day, that portion of it was tragic, not the whole day. The whole day was like the creation of heaven and earth. trying to understand why one of the first things that the Jews did coming out of the Yam, they had this closeness with Hashem, this love. They start talking about Zekeli Vanavehu, doing mitzvahs, they haven't even had the mitzvahs yet. They're talking about doing mitzvahs in a beautified form. And we're trying to understand just the essence of what is that concept of beautifying mitzvahs. Is that a function of one's love for God? Is it a function for one's respect or awe from Hashem? How do we understand that? I've said this over a number of times for my Rosh Hashiva, and he said it 30 years ago. I'm like updated to the times. He said it by reading the newspaper. But if you walk into a restaurant and you see a man and woman talking to each other, he says, they're going out. When you walk in and each one is looking at their cell phone and each one is texting, says they're married. Mm-hmm. He said it by reading the newspaper, but just to make it a little bit more, I don't know who reads a newspaper today. One of the big problems with relationships are that sometimes we have a greater appreciation for one another at a distance. When we're not so close, we show more respect. Somehow when the boundaries and the walls start falling and we get closer, we start taking more things for granted. To the point, right, there's even, it's an adage, familiarity breeds contempt. Sometimes getting so close, not only aren't we showing the appropriate respect, we can start showing disrespect. And that's something in every relationship is a challenge. How do we stop the relationship from becoming so close to the point where the boundaries of propriety, the boundaries of respect, and even the opposite, disrespect and contempt, can possibly set in? So this is the idea of what happened. This is what's going on by the Kriyas Yamsuf. Kriyas Yamsuf, we said, it was almost a tangible sense of God. It was so close. The maidservants start having visions. I mean, it is such a close relationship. Bnei Yisrael felt we have to do something to ensure that the closeness of the relationship, and the closer we get, there's still going to be boundaries. There's still going to be a way of doing it. When something is exquisite, when something is beautiful, right? You walk into a place that it's awe-inspiring. I had that experience. You walk into a beautiful shul. You're in awe. When you see something that is so beautiful, it creates a sense of awe, a sense of respect. The idea that we're saying to Hashem, we're saying, don't worry, we're going to beautify the mitzvahs. We're saying is, as close as we are, we're not going to allow our closeness to go beyond the boundaries of what's appropriate. And the way we do that is by beautifying the avodas Hashem we do. Beautiful shul, is because that's how it's a function of our love. Our love is so great for God that we want to make sure that it doesn't create a situation that we're going to step over the threshold and go into an area of disrespect or being something that Chas v'Shalom will lead to contempt. How do we do that? That's Hidur Mitzvah. The hidur of the mitzvah is the protection that the mitzvah itself should not lead to that level of closeness that we don't act appropriate anymore. We see this. We see this. In the places where we are closest with Hashem, sometimes we are the most disrespectful. And go look at what's happening in Shul. That's why the Sfardim, Ashkenazim don't have that. Ashkenazim, you'll take a closet, make it into a shul. You don't walk into a Sephardic shul. I remember in Miami it was the Bukharian shul. It was like you walk in there, the chandeliers and it's like you feel the presence. It's like the beauty creates the awe and the respect. It's a function of our love, but it's to make sure that the boundaries are there. Which means that the Ramchal and the Mesilas Yesharim, they're not arguing in which category it goes. The one he's focusing is, because of the love, that's why you have to do it, to create that awe and respect. That one's putting it by love, because it is an expression of how much we love Hashem, is why we want to do it. It's not an argument, just the question is the perspective of how you look at it. And that's why at Yam Sov, even before we got the mitzvahs, we know what it means to be so close, we want to make sure it doesn't break those boundaries. What happens at Har Sinai? Har Sinai was also a tremendous manifestation, probably the greatest one-time manifestation of the world, God's Shekhinah coming down on the mountain. What do the Skenim do? They're eating, it's Purim, right? Eating, drinking, and they gaze at the Shekhinah. Not appropriate. Why? They're so close, they felt so close, they didn't think there was a problem. That they're drunk and they're eating to look at the Shekhinah. They didn't think it was a problem. Hashem gives it a pass. But you know what happens at the day of the Hakamas HaMishkan? The day of the Hakamas HaMishkan, it happens again. How does it happen again? The closeness, the simcha, the joy of building the Mishkan, what does that make happen? Nadav and Avihus, feeling that closeness to God, bring an Eish Zara, either the Shisuya Yai and whatever but it was a function of the closeness of the day that led to them. That was already, it happened once, now it happened again, a second time. There's no pass on the second time. Our question was that you didn't want to share the simcha the first time, why you do it? Because the second time you didn't learn your lesson. You saw what happened at Har Sinai, you didn't learn the lesson, you do it again? That's why it had to happen, that they had to get punished over there, because they just repeating the same indiscretion that occurred the first time. That's why it happened. And that's why the whole day is defined as Vayehi. Because it's because of the day. The simcha is what caused the problem. It wasn't a separate compartmentalize it. Okay, so when you got a Yerusha and you got it's the simcha is what caused that to happen, and the whole day is defined as tragedy. The whole day is defined as tragedy because that is what caused it to happen. So we've answered up our questions. The day is defined as tragedy because it's the simcha of the day. Why it happens now, it didn't happen earlier. Because this is a repeat. Twice you don't get off the hook. It's a repeat of what happened. Because the closeness, that love, that being so close and celebration, sometimes unfortunately can lead to the breakdown of boundaries. So the question really for ourselves, what's the takeaway for ourselves? So we have to, and I think, and it depends on people, personalities. Some women like when their husbands shower them with beautiful things, make them look as beautiful as they can, whether it's jewelry, whether it's clothing. But I think the fundamental understanding is that when you make something look beautiful, it creates a boundary. It becomes inspiring, it becomes awe, even though it would seem superficial, but it's not necessarily superficial because it's a reflection of the boundaries of the relationship. But again, that doesn't work with everyone. So what needs to happen in every relationship is figuring out that what do we need to put in place that I can still focus on the things that are in our spouse that still inspire, that still creates that awe, that does not allow for anything that it's really truth of a we don't do it. We do it subconsciously. The fact that we act certain ways, it's not a conscious thing. It's just we forget about the things that we should be showing respect for. So we need to figure out what can we do within the relationship to show that respect still has to be there. And that's the same thing with our children. What are the reminders with our students? What are the reminders that there has to be boundaries, there has to be parameters? That's something that there's no one solution to it because it all depends on the personalities, but there are certain things that have to be done. For example, in the school, an adult walks into a room, the adults need to stand. That's more than just because we need to show respect because it's an adult move into the room. It's because I need the students to understand that there's still a boundary that has to be shown between a child and an adult. As long as they keep doing that, that's a message that gets drilled within them, and it has manifestations in other, we have when parents come around and see the school from other schools and whatever it is, that's one of the things that they're most impressed by. That a child stands when they walk into a classroom, right? Because that's lost. That whole idea of showing respect in such a way. I mean, the halacha is your father walks into the room. I knew people still that when a parent walked in the room, they would stand. Who today even thinks of standing when a parent walks into a room? But that's the point. The point is that the boundaries of what is it that's going to remind us of that the relationship has to be dealt with respect, with awe, and not allowing the familiarity and that closeness to go beyond the pale of what is acceptable. Because it's one of the hardest things to do. One of the hardest things to do. You're living with someone for 50 years. How do you still maintain that they still inspire you, that they still awe, that there's still respect? It's part of working on a relationship, but at least recognizing that if I don't work on it, what's going to end up happening. That's the first step. Now we have to figure out how to work on it and what has to happen. But as I said, every single relationship has that challenge. A shul with a rabbi. Sometimes you get so close that it becomes inappropriate. There are boundaries. He's the rabbi. He's the rabbi. So I'm opening up the can of worms here. I'm not necessarily giving you the solution, what has to happen, but this is where it starts if you want functional relationships that are based on respect. There has to be a sense of the appropriate boundaries being set up and the recognition that sometimes those can be ignored because of the love that we feel and the closeness we feel, and we have to, because of that, ensure that we put those boundaries and those things in place.